To counter the German fighters, we formed groups of 4 aircraft, a lead, 2 aside, and 1 at the bottom. And they all always went together instead of a single aircraft. They could then conceive the idea was, why don't we put all those 4 aircraft together in a line? You have 1 up the top, down, 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 then go up, up, up. And there's a long line of perhaps up to 100 aircraft. And they're all throwing out the window the metallic paper that nullifies. The German radar. It's the same as an aircraft. In other words, having that big column is a huge mass of this radar. If the anti-aircraft is close to your aircraft rocks around, and you get this sort of thing flying through the aircraft. To be hit, you know that you've got a problem. There's a terrible noise. You find that the control of the aircraft is affected in some way, and you've got to correct it. And that's the major thing about it. Close flak is really terrible. I've seen some aircraft being caught with flak and completely explode. You see this huge explosion, and you see parachutes shooting out all over the place. It's awe-inspiring. It's not a thing you want to talk about. We were safe from fighters because our fighters had conquered the Germans. They always went ahead of us and beat up the aerodromes where the German fighters were going to fly from. The chap that formed our 4, he was from a neighbouring squadron. His navigator convinced his pilot that the lead had gone too far. We were going in a column like this. We do a right-hand turn 1 minute into the target. And he said he's gone past the turn-off point. So this chap says, well, we'll turn off. So our 4 turned off out of the column, and we were running parallel to the lead. He's out here. We were now subject to all the flak, and they picked it on us all the time. And it wasn't long before some of us hit. Our number 3 was hit, and he went down. He hit number 4, and those were the only 2 aircraft that were lost in that raid. There was 2. The rear gunner, when he was in flak area, kept his head down below his guns for protection. And he lifted his head to watch this aircraft collide and go down. And as he did, something went through, the flak went through it. But up in front, I was getting pasted a bit, and that bit of flak came through the window up here and caught me right there. That's it, right there. And my head knocked the steel plate at the back, and I was stunned for a moment. But what I did was I looked at my hand, which was on the throttles, and I wiggled my fingers. I said, I'm all right. So I carried on flying, and we we finished our bombing run and got out of it. But my problem was I was now blood everywhere. The flight engineer got a pad and put it in my oxygen mask, but then I couldn't talk. They couldn't understand me, so I had to write little notes for him for the rest of the trip. Anyway, we did in our time 38 trips to Germany. On our first trip, which was a night trip, we went to Essen. Now, going there on our first one was absolutely a shock. I couldn't get used to the fact that the other aircraft were around us. I couldn't see them. I didn't know where I was going to hit them. There was the flak, there was the searchlights, and so on. And when I got home afterwards, I thought, if I've got to go through this another 29 times, I'll go round the bend. And things looked a hell of a lot better. I could see where all the other aircraft were. I could see what the flak looked like. It just was, well, what I could say is, I'll put up with this, I'll cope. And so we went on from there. We did our trips and so on. 38 trips, 10 were night trips. And they got to the stage where the RAF wanted to increase firepower over Germany. They increased the tour from 24 ops to 30 ops. And it so happened that we had to do 30 ops. We got to 38 and they reduced the score back to 30. So the CO says you're finished, clear of the station, and so on. Well, the first thing we did was to gather the ground crew, four a number, that looked after the aircraft, take them down to the local pub and get some beer into them, and to thank them for their efforts, because they had to put up with some terrible weather to keep the aircraft fit and so on. I went off on final leave, and instead of a fortnight, I think I had 13 weeks. They couldn't get my next move ready because I said I would go into Transport Command. You've got a cover of chaps, 7 or 8, which you're responsible for. All you know is you're going to get through there right or wrong. And it does affect some chaps. They have to give it away. They can't stand it. But all you've got to do is steel your mind and go through it. It doesn't last that long. It's just a few minutes, gone. It's a responsibility which, when I think about it now, is probably too great for what I should have, where I was taken. But that was the measure of the chaps that did it. Not all of them could go. Some of them gave away, said, we can't stand this. But at the time, it's scary. But if your memory erases it, you can go on with it and so on. It's I've got a photograph somewhere where we've got the holes in the side of the aircraft, the gashes and so forth. We didn't receive a lot of damage. Some aircraft, of course, had big pieces knocked off and so forth. We never did. We never lost an engine. We certainly got some holes, but that's about all. Yeah. So what we did as crew, that's a scarecrow. Germans have got a special thing which they shoot up like that to scare us. And in other words, it's an imitation that we believe, and that sets our mind at rest. We don't have to worry about those chaps that have just perished. It's just one way of trying to live with it. Yes, yeah. We became the leading aircraft of our squadron. If the squadron was going to fly anywhere, we did the lead. That went into the raids as well, so that when our squadron, other squadrons from the group were on a raid, our squadron had a turn at leading, which meant that our aircraft was the one right out in front there, and we had that on several occasions. So it was quite a big thing for us. Yeah, there were some operations where there was very little opposition. So Schumann Dam.
Yeah. What about that one?
We were supposed to attack it, but they withdrew us before we could drop any bombs there. On occasions, I remember we had to fly across the channel at low level. In other words, we were going to attack something close to the coast, and we're going to sort of keep below their radar. But we'd only gone, halfway, and we were recalled because the fighters that were going to attach us, they could not take off because of fog. So that was a raid that didn't take place. We had all intention, but we had to come back. And of course, if you come back and you've got a cookie on board, a cookie is a 4,000 pounder. You do not land with a cookie on, because you may thump in and the thing drops. So what you do, you have a special area in the North Sea which you go and drop that in there. And it seems a terrible waste, but ever. The effect of, a cookie when it drops in the snow, the ripples are going. You know what water's like when it's like that, but it's quick. And of course, there's a time when a bomb won't leave your aircraft. The flight engineer can get down on the steps, open a little gate, and look in along the bomb bay. There's the bomb. And so what you do then is you start doing this, sort of, and you get it dropped off. Yeah. The 500 pounder was the standard bomb that you could carry all 500 pounders depending on what the target was. You could also carry what we call incendiaries. Well, they were in big boxes and so on. The idea was that if you had a cookie, you dropped it, it shattered it, and then the incendiaries came in and set fire to it all and so on. And that was only the three types we had. There's a total story of when we landed at an American aerodrome and had to wait before we could take off again, and we had the bag doors open. And the Americans came along and looked at it, and they were absolutely amazed at the size of the bomb bay in the Lancaster. Of course, in a fortress, the bombs are vertical, and they don't take up so much room. Ours are horizontal. And these Americans were absolutely aghast at the size of the... they realised then that we carried a hell of a lot more fuel ammunition than they did. But, yeah. The targets we were after, my three group, were oil targets. They were fuel tanks, fuel refineries, full storage, anything that would cut down the oil supplies to the German fighters. And the Germans themselves, in writing, say that that was a very big effort, and it's well worth the trial. Like the other bomber groups were after towns, knocking buildings down and so forth, and we were a three group after the fuel. We were too high up. We were up 20,000 feet. And you've got to remember, some of this was at night. So in daytime we can see things, yes. But I couldn't, because I'm sitting here flying and it's underneath me down there. Some of the other crew could put their heads out and look and see it, but not me. Yeah. The nighttime ones were far more concentration. You had instruments and you were watching them closely. Daytime, you're sitting there looking around and so forth, you are more relaxed. You had more chance of hitting the daytime ones than the nighttime ones. We had the effect of every time you press the bomb button, a camera starts going and it's taking shots along your bombing run. And you see, it finally comes to one where it says your bomb has landed. They always were looked at by the ground crew. In their mess, we used to put the photos up so they could see it and each compare one aircraft against the other and so on. And I always remember we had it was night time and it was oil tanks, I think, and we got the perfect photograph. And the CEO was taking it around and showing all his buddies. So said, "This is what we do." Yeah. It really is the moment before the bomb hit. The camera tells you that's where the bomb's going to go. And then certainly in one of those daylight trips, we were to bomb the marshalling yards at Cologne. And our photograph showed, so help me God, the cathedral in our bombing photograph. And I thought, oh, we've damaged the cathedral. And when Joan and I were travelling around Europe, we stopped at Cologne. I got a hold of the driver and said, has the cathedral got any damage to the war? He says, just a little. I told him what had happened. The fact was that if your camera does a little that way or that way, of course it goes down there, It included and our bombs didn't hit it at all. But I was very relieved. Yeah. The few that we did were getting on our tail. They were going to attack us from the stern. I wouldn't see them, but the rear gunner would see it and he'd describe it coming in. And when he did, we did what we call a corkscrew action. If he's coming in this way, we turn the aircraft over, go down like that, roll it like that, up like that, over like that, roll it again, and you're doing this corkscrew. The Germans don't carry on. It's hopeless for them to shoot. And that's what takes place. The rear gunner is describing what the aircraft is doing to you, and you're doing this corkscrew here. The Lancaster was the best aircraft I ever flew. Oh, it was marvellous. It's big, but the point was we flew a bigger plane to start with, Sterling. It looked far big and not so graceful. And you go to the Lancaster, it's smaller, it's neater, and it's faster. And it's got everything that goes with it. Oh, it's a beautiful aircraft. We in our aircraft had an extra gunner. Of course, we had what we call a mid-under gunner. He's underneath. You have the rear gunners, the four, the mid-upper gunner, and you have the front gunner as well. We never flew in daylights with the mid-under gunner because you wouldn't get attacked during the daylight. But at night you could get attacked. And what the Germans were doing at night was this is the area, they're under here and they come in the dark, which you can't see, and they've got the upward firing guns. They go to a wing and just shoot into the wing, which is all fuel tanks, and in seconds the whole thing's aflame. That was the reason we had the rear, the mid-under gunner. Probably our longest trip was when we went to Dresden. Dresden is way in the east of Germany, and the Russians had asked for help. They wanted some effort from us to help them with it. Anyway, we had this raid. The first wave went in at 10 o'clock. We went in at 2 in the morning, and the Americans went in the daylight. So it was quite a massive trip. But the one thing that struck me when I read it was that the nearest fighter station to Dresden couldn't take off because they had no fuel. And I thought, well, at least we did some good. And yes, and that was towards the end of our tour. When they reduced the tour from 40 back to 30, we of course had finished at 38. So it's get the ground crew together, down to the local pub, fill them with beer and thank them for their efforts and so forth. And this flak is the one that was in my face. It was right there. Yep. It hit there and dropped on the floor. And the flight engineer picked it up. It couldn't lodge in my face because I had a pair of ordinary glasses, big Air Force glasses, an oxygen mask, and so forth, which has a microphone in it. It's quite a massive thing. It penetrated to cut the skin, but then it dropped away. It couldn't lodge there. We were going to fly Dakotas and supply to the Far East. However, he had to crew up. The new crew was one navigator and a wireless operator. The navigator was a New Zealander, and we did the ground study, got to the aerodrome, started playing with the aircraft, and the navigator said, "No, I'm not going to put up with this." So he pulled out, and I get a bit disillusioned with navigators. Anyway, we had to go back and do the fortnight's work again. And we were about to go to the flying school to start flying the Dakota when three things happened. Germany surrendered. I got a bar to my DFC, and the Prime Minister says, "I want all aircrew, all troops home by Christmas 45. So that was the end of that. I had planned to go on to Transport Command. They said, "No, you're not required now." And we went up to Midlands to catch our troop ship. It was the Multan that we had quite a few Polish troops that wanted to go home, and there was a lot of New Zealanders and Australians. And we took off, and we first stop was Alexandra, and there was New Zealand nurses were coming up the gangplank, and they were talking, and it struck me what a terrible accent they've got, because I'd had years of other accents and so forth. Anyway, it wasn't terrible, it was just unusual. Anyway, the Polish were dropped off in Italy, and we proceeded to have a stop in Australia, Fremantle, and from there on we came home, and a thing happened there that my old false headmaster, Fritz Martin Renner, was retiring, and he'd rung my dad and said, "Is Ken home yet? I want him to come to my farewell dinner." And Dad says, "No, he's still 3 or 4 days away in the boat." So I missed that altogether there. Anyway, we got home, and my two brothers were there for Christmas, and that's the first time we've been together for some years. I was put onto a reserve. As far as I know, I still might be called upon to fight the next war, but I'm not sure. Yeah. Now, you've got to have a sense of humour. Got to be able to laugh and so forth. Yeah. One thing that bugs me is that youngsters take to drink very early, and that's the thing I think is quite wrong. Sure, occasional drinks, but they become consistent drinkers and perpetual drinkers. And I think that has a lot to killing off our youngsters early. And drugs, I frown on that. Absolutely. Not at all. However, it doesn't make me out a good fellow at all. It's just I won't take to these things. I'll keep steer of them. In fact, I haven't had a beer for ages. Yet, when in the Air Force, beer was the usual drink. You know, you had to be in to drink beer and so on. But a good family man is what I would like to be remembered by. And if for that, life's worth living. Yeah.
I really hope you enjoyed watching this video. Please like, share and subscribe for more deep dives into our history. Together, we remember. Together, we learn.